So welcome everybody to this Thrive webinar, part of our Spotlight series today. I'm Emma Platts and delighted to be hosting today's session on behalf of Thrive, Neurodiversity and Mental Health. Joining us today is the amazing Jackie Shears, and Jackie will be sharing some powerful and practical strategies for personal stress management, supporting both individuals and managers as we navigate the demands of modern working life. I'm really excited about this, actually, Jackie. This session is going to be great, and I know that I won't be the only one looking forward to it. There will be a lot of people watching on record. Hello to everybody. Any questions that you may have, you can direct to me, Emma, at itstimetotthrive.co.uk, and myself or Jackie will get back to you. So without further ado, Jackie, it's over to you.
Thank you, Emma, for that lovely introduction. That was really kind. I'm really glad to be here. I feel really strongly about doing anything that we can to help people understand and be able to think constructively about the things that they've got on their plate, the stress that they're facing, and manage that in a way that enables them to be as mentally healthy as possible. I came to this having spent most of my career being that strong person who did all the things, and discovered about 13 years ago, to my horror, that I am in fact only human. And as a result, I fell off my perch because I was trying to run. I did run, but by the end of the national programme I was implementing with 3 small children under the age of 7, I discovered my limit, fell off my perch, and started my journey realising what poor mental health looks and feels like, and also the ways in which the workplace can massively contribute to somebody's decline, but also to their recovery, having had good and bad experiences. So this piece of work came out of that and is part of a series of things that support the individual to be able to look at, think about, draw their attention to their own stresses, but also provides an opportunity to structure a conversation with a line manager. It provides line managers with the opportunity to work with their teams and have open, constructive, supportive conversations. And it offers organisations the opportunity to ensure that all of their line managers can do that. So this can be done at whatever level is helpful. Let's move on. Before we do, I'd quite like you all to think about why bother? Why would we bother worrying about all of this? And my analogy for you is that if this was a manufacturing company, we would rely on machinery as a key resource, and no finance director worth their salt would deny the value of having a regular maintenance contract. They'd sign off on that bottom line, and scheduled maintenance would happen, because unplanned maintenance in a production line is phenomenally expensive. And keeping the machinery optimal is everybody's focus. Brilliant. Oh, we see where you're going with this, Jackie. We're going to talk about the fact that organisations rely on people, and therefore we need to keep them optimal and healthy, and that's all good. I am, but I'm going to be much more specific. My contention is that what we actually rely on is people's mental energy. And burned out people, if you have 100 burned out people, your productivity is going to be a lot less than if you've got 100 people who are enjoying really good positive mental energy. And the thing that makes the difference for an organisation and for an individual is how much mental energy are they enjoying? What's consuming their mental energy? What do they have available to offer at work? What are they struggling with at home? How is work impacting home? And what's that doing for the general levels of mental health, mental energy? Because if you keep your mental energy really good, it's fundamental to your performance at work, but it's also fundamental to your individual enjoyment of life, as well as to the success of your organisation. So there is a big win here for everybody. And when I'm talking about mental energy, the thing that I'm talking about is the ability to think clearly. So we haven't got brain fog and noisy crowding thoughts from a stressed and overwhelmed brain. And as a result, the ability to perform optimally. So you look at a task and you're capable of processing, oh, I know exactly what I need to do about that. I feel confident about doing that, and I'm able to go nail it. And I can do it with enthusiasm and motivation because I've got good levels of mental energy. I'm not depleted and feeling flattened by wider stresses that are taking away my motivation and my enthusiasm. And I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it, and I'm engaged in what I'm doing, because if I'm engaged, then I'm going to be thinking carefully. I'm going to be potentially thinking creatively and laterally, and I'm going to be getting something out of it for me personally. And as an employer, that's what you need out of your staff. And then one of the last things I will mention, and for me, it's the key indicator of whether I am in a good place or in a not good place, is whether I've got the bandwidth for curiosity. Curiosity is a bit of a luxury. You have to have a bit of mental space to be curious. If you've got 15 things on your task list and you're head down just trying to get them done, there is no capacity for you to go, ooh, they've asked me to do that, and they've asked me to do that. They're sides of the same coin. I wonder if we got a meeting together, we could create a way to address this in a different way. You're just going to go, I need to do that, I need to do that, I need to do that, I need to do that. And curiosity is really valuable, but it's also a luxury. So if staff, I like to think of mental energy a bit like I think of broadband at home. If you've got 6 people logged on and 5 of them are downloading different games and films, and you need to access a database at work and run a really heavy duty query, something in that wide range of things is going to slow down and start glitching, because you've used up all your broadband, you've used up all of your bandwidth, your mental energy is stretched across too many tasks. And if we do that with our heads, we start to limit our ability to be curious or to enjoy it or to do something with enthusiasm and motivation. And the final thing is, when you've got good mental energy, it helps you keep a grip on your emotions. It helps to keep those emotions positive. It helps you to remain constructive and courteous and tolerant. One of the first signs for me that someone is starting to run out of mental energy is when meeting etiquette, frustrations, annoyance, anger, maybe tears are starting to emerge, because in that wide list of things that people have divided their mental energy against, they've run out of the ability to keep a handle on their emotions, to remain constructive, to stay positive, to step back. And it's the sign that somebody needs some support, that they have run out of mental energy, and that as an organization, I'd be stepping in to go, let's go and have a coffee. I think we need a chat. So if that's what mental energy is, who's responsible for the mental energy levels of employees? I would argue that there are three places that are responsible for mental energy levels of employees. The first one is the organization. So the policies that we have, the culture that operates. So if you have terrific policies and a terrible culture of blame and aggressive shouting and shaming and demanding and overworking, it doesn't matter how glorious your policies, your culture's shocking, and your mental energy, the mental energy of your employees is going to be taken in part by dealing with that negative culture. On the contrary, if you have really clear supportive policies and supported managers who provide an environment of growth and development and of learning and reflecting, not of blame and aggression, then you're going to be operating you will have employees who are operating without taking mental energy to deal with, he's going to overreact if we don't do this a certain way or whatever. And the second is your line manager. Your day and your week and your month can be made good, bad, or otherwise by your line manager. They're probably the person that you will have the most contact with. And their approach, the level of support that they provide you, and their attitude can make or break what else you're having to think about with your mental energy. So if you arrive with 100% and you're already taking 20% of your mental energy to account for the fact that you're in a very aggressive, blaming culture, and therefore you need to be aware of how you say things, aware of how you deliver things, aware of whose toes you stand on, aware of making sure that you finish absolutely everything on your to-do list, otherwise you'll get shouted at. You've already reduced your mental energy by 20%. If you have a micromanaging line manager who insists that you do things their way, not the way that you've been trained to do, and you're having to translate, you're now putting twice as much energy into doing something. So you're down to half your mental energy already because of your line manager's approach. The alternative, of course, is someone who gives you space, who gives you agency to use your skills, makes you feel like you're carrying some responsibility and therefore some respect, and you grow and you're keen to grow and you're keen to prove your worth, and you have a very different use of your mental energy and your external presentation as a result. And the third person is the individual, because the reality is the organization can have fabulous policies and a brilliant culture, and you can have the most supportive line manager on the planet. But if you persist with working from 8 in the morning till 9 in the evening, even though you're told not to, and you're told to leave that until tomorrow, but you carry on and work because you're avoiding going home, because for whatever reason, spending time at home isn't a place you want to be. And then you go out drinking and you're consuming lots of alcohol and going to bed very late. It doesn't matter how positive the organization and the line manager, you are still going to have struggles with your mental energy because you are not taking your own approach to looking after your own mental health in a positive and healthy way. But between all of those lands the possibility of a mentally well, energized employee who is capable of offering the best to the organization. Before we get to the final bit of this presentation in terms of how we can look after our mental energy and draw our attention to it and use that to talk to our line manager, to other people, to the organization, I just want to have a consideration about what steals our mental energy. What are the things that will start to deplete the mental energy that we have available? And we've talked a bit about an aggressive culture or an overbearing line manager. We've divided it into the 4 O's. So the first is overload. So if we have a fixed bandwidth that's available for delivering at work and that bandwidth is overloaded, you have too much work or too much for your neurotype presented in a way that is overwhelming because it's given to you all at the start of the week rather than giving it to you at the start of the day each day, and you're able to process what you need to do and organize your time and deliver because it's not too much to consider. That overload is going to consume more mental energy than is helpful for the individual or the organization. The next one is overuse. So we may have a manageable number of tasks that have been presented to us in a helpful and supportive way, and we're fully aware of what we need to do, but we don't take breaks. If I was to hold a glass of water, I'm holding my glass of water. If I hold this glass of water and I hold it for the next hour, my arm's going to ache a bit, but it's fine. I'm going to be a little bit limited in what I can do because I've tied one hand up holding the glass of water. If I was to hold that same glass of water for the next 8 hours straight, not put it down, I'm going to be in a whole world of pain. I'm going to have cramp in my arm, cramp in my hand. It's probably going to go up into my shoulder, and it's probably going to persist up into give me a headache and down my back. And it may even still be sore the next day. And at no point did that glass of water change. It didn't change in its weight or its impact. The problem was I didn't put the glass down every hour, stretch my arm, and reuse those muscles in a different way. I've ended up with cramp and knots and muscle strain because I didn't reuse the muscles in a different way, use some different muscles, give those a rest, and do so every hour. And our brain is no different. So it's really important that if we want to look after our mental energy, we know what our limits are, we take regular breaks, we stop exercising our work brain and we go and do something different, 5-10 minutes, take a proper lunch break, take a coffee break, go and get a coffee, go outside, feel the fresh air, draw our attention to sensations rather than to thinking, so that we give our thinking brain a rest, and we give the work bit of our brain, the opportunity to slow back down, rest, stretch, and then we go back to it. The third one is overwhelm. So we may have a manageable workload, we may take regular breaks, but if we don't have sufficient support, for example, we've been given tasks that we're not sure of and we need a bit of guidance, we need a pointer to some documentation that can help us, or a conversation with our line manager to help us understand the point, the key goals, the things that particularly matter out of this tasks, or we've been given inputs that challenge our neurotype. Despite the adjustments that we've agreed with the organization, the new line manager isn't aware and is persisting with providing inputs that are very unhelpful and go against the adjustments that have been requested. And all of those things potentially will consume mental energy and leave a person feeling very overwhelmed. A large part of their mental energy will go on worrying that they don't know how to do it, dealing with the sensory challenges that have been created, and overthinking will begin to develop where people are feeling overloaded or overused or overwhelmed. You end up in that fourth O of overthinking. It's a natural byproduct of stress, but once we start to feel overwhelmed or overloaded, our head becomes closer and closer to entering fight or flight, feeling unsafe, the stress levels rise, and we start to begin to feel that sensation of moving into a more anxious state, feeling under threat, and overthinking begins to happen. And once people start overthinking, we're immediately taking up even more of their mental energy, overthinking a thing that if they were calm, supported, had an appropriate workload, and were fresh from a break, they would look at that task and go, I can write that letter, and they would do. But when they're not, when they're overloaded, or they haven't had breaks, or they're feeling overwhelmed and unsure that they know what the point of the letter is, and they begin to feel stressed and overthinking, and a letter that should take half an hour to write ends up taking 2 hours whilst we overthink every word and every sentence. Now, that's what we mean by mental energy and the ways in which mental energy can get divided too thin. The next thing I'd like to do is look at how we can draw our attention to that. And this is a super practical bit. So if you want to get a piece of paper and a pen, or stop the video and go and grab a piece of paper and a pen, feel free. There are lots of ways that you can manage the 4 O's. I'm going to run through a few here, and then we're going to look at a toolkit that you can adopt for your own personal use, for use in your teams, for use across your organization. The first thing is to be aware of your needs. Understand, think about, reflect on the things that help you thrive. And sometimes that's because we chat to other people and we discover that actually we're really good when a particular situation happens. If you've got a chance to brainstorm something with somebody before you go and do it, you go to it with a clarity of thought that's really helpful. The second is to practice separation. If you feel and notice yourself starting to feel a rising sense of overwhelm, you begin butterflying from one task to the next because you've got too many things on your list. Once you notice how you start to feel when you're getting into that situation, you're in a position to step back, mentally step back from the emotions that they're bringing up. So if it's a challenge with a particular individual and you recognize that when you're in a room with them, everything starts to tighten, you may start to get a cough as your throat tightens, your thinking starts to lose. Find the ways to mentally step back and survey those facts and acknowledge that as a physiological reaction that is coming from a particularly stressful situation. Maybe take a moment, begin to know what your triggers are and acknowledge they exist. Begin to develop the strategies to manage those. And potentially practice separation from those thoughts. If you're beginning to build overthinking in a situation, starting to worry, for example, you've started a new job and you're anxiously thinking that nobody likes you because very few people are stopping by your desk to say anything, and maybe they didn't want to employ you, maybe they employed somebody else. You can generate a whole scenario of thoughts that come out of, why do they feel like this? Why are they behaving like this? Thoughts are not facts. Thoughts can be internally generated based on our anxious thinking. And it's really important that we know the difference between facts and our internal thoughts. And the reason I'm mentioning this now is we're going to come back to it when we start looking at the practical toolkit. So it's really important that we seek to let those wasps out, that we seek to share the niggling, buzzing thought that nobody likes you. Find the way to start a conversation with someone you do feel safe to talk about. Share the concern that you have in a safe place, get somebody else's perspective on it, because when we say things out loud, it's like letting a wasp out of a jar. It flies away. The old adage is a problem shared is a problem halved, and it's really true. When you say a worry out loud, it lets it out. It stops it being contained in your head, buzzing louder and louder. And internally generated thoughts often don't have a basis in fact, and when you say them, that's it. You said it out loud and it doesn't bug you in the same way. It might be that you say a thought out loud and there is some evidence for it, and you can have a conversation with a colleague about, yeah, that comment in a meeting was a little bit spiky. Can we have a chat about that and work through it? And you start to feel more in control. Oops. And then the last overarching strategy is around exerting control. If you're beginning to feel overwhelmed, if you're feeling overloaded, it is really important that you step back and take control. Very much a huge part of mental health is about the extent to which we feel in control. And a huge part of mental ill health is about the extent to which we feel like we're out of control. So as you're starting to feel stressed, the ability to think through what must you do, sense check this, talk to somebody, talk to your line manager. What is critical? Not everything is, not everything can be critical. What can you do? What is possible? So if you've been given 10 things to do and you have capability to do 8 of them, flag what is possible, explain the gap between what you can do and what must be done, and then escalate the responsibility for deciding which of the 8 things you will do, because it's the organization's responsibility to deliver on the 10 things. They've raised those requirements for you to deliver on 10 things, but they can't ask you to do 10 things when there is simply only capacity for 8. So escalate the responsibility to say, I can't do, which 2 things can I push into next week? And it might be that none of them can be pushed into next week, in which case 2 of them might get delegated to somebody else. It might be that of the 10 things, 2 can be done partially, 1 can be left behind. You retain responsibility for all 10, but we've simmered down the expectation and the requirement. But you personally understanding what you can do and flagging what is possible versus sense checking what must be done is a really important exercise in you taking control of what you're expected to handle. So with that with those ground rules of ways in which we can manage the things that steal our mental energy, we'll go into a bit of a toolkit. And if everybody's got a piece of paper, we're going to talk about stress buckets, which probably aren't an unfamiliar thing. Let's imagine that every head in a working environment is going to have a whole series of things going on. There's work generally, there's your health or others' health, there's stuff with family and family responsibilities. Politics is a big one at the moment, which will invariably at some point generate stress when you think about it. There's probably specific things in your work to-do list that are playing on your mind. And you may also have masking or sensory intrusions to deal with, or social anxieties that you're dealing with as a result of how you experience the world. And if we imagine that inside every head, which has its own unique set of things that it is thinking about and responsible for, there is a stress bucket, and every one of the things that they are thinking about or that they have a responsibility for carries some stress, and it drops its stress into the stress bucket. You begin to get a sense of how this is going to work. If everything has a little bit of stress attached to it, that stress is going to accumulate. And even if you only have many little stresses, at some point, there's going to be a bucket that starts to fill up. And stress capacity naturally varies from one individual to the next. We all have a very different frame of reference. We all have a very different set of experiences that have shaped how our brains approach challenge and threat and opportunity, and how we deal with risk and how we deal with things that make us feel slightly anxious. So those buckets are going to vary from one person to the next. And line managers, you need to be aware of the fact that's a fact. Some people have a big apparent stress bucket than other people. Those buckets are going to fill faster if they are naturally smaller, or if a massive stress arrives, if a big serious illness, if a nasty accident, if a bereavement, if congratulations, you're on the list for consultation for redundancy. All of those things can be big stresses that drop an enormous dollop of stress into a bucket. But even little stresses can accumulate. And if we don't empty the bucket regularly, we are going to find ourselves in a really difficult place, because a full stress bucket leads us to a point where we've used up all our mental energy. We're operating on really fine margins of available mental energy because it is completely divided across all of those different things. And the associated stresses of all of those different things are combining to fill our stress bucket. So physiologically, our body is starting to respond differently. We're producing different and more hormones that regulate how our body operates. Our cortisol is going up. We may be engaging with adrenaline, which redirects our blood flow. So we end up with gastric symptoms because we've got reduced blood flow to our stomach, because we're perceiving threat, because we've got this high level of stress, which means there must be a danger. There isn't, but we're starting to see physiological change and physiological symptoms caused by living in a stressed state all the time. So one of the ways in which we can take responsibility for looking after this is to take that concept of a stress bucket. And if you've got a piece of paper and a pen, and if you want to do this, you don't have to draw a bucket, you can just write it down. But one of the things that can be immensely helpful is just to step back and write down all of the things that you are thinking about, that are playing on your mind, that are waking you in the night, that are interrupting your focus and your concentration, that are reducing your patience with the niff-naff and trivia of the day. Write those down and begin to understand just how much you've got on your plate. And first off, appreciate that fact. Give yourself credit for the fact that you're handling a lot of things. But then let's take some filters to that list that you've got. If you want to stop the video and do this as we go along, feel free. Jot down everything that you've got in your stress bucket and see what comes to mind. You might have things to do with your relationships, maybe with your partner, maybe more widely in the family. You may be worried about friends and what friends are going through. You might be supporting somebody who's having a particularly difficult time, and that's taking some of your stress bucket capacity, your mental energy bandwidth. There's a myriad opportunities at work to generate sources of stress. You can jot them down separately so that you start to get a real sense of quite what you're carrying. Owning a home or living in a home carries with it the chores, the activities of daily living, maintenance, sharing a living space, the challenges of the fact that things break down, usually at the most inconvenient time. If you're living in a family, if you're close family or your extended family, of parenting and the dynamics of parenting and the variety of blended families and family types that we have and the responsibilities that go with all of that. Your own health, others' health, neurodiversity challenges that you may be facing yourself or others, people that you feel close to, responsible for, or are trying to support. And then the joy of finances, which is a perennial source of stress for everybody in terms of all the things that are required of you. You begin to see how actually maybe there's a bit more stress in your bucket than you thought. Because when we think about being stressed at work, we think about the things that we've got on at work. We don't give credit for all the other stuff that is also contributing to taking some of our mental energy and building that, adding to the level of stress in our bucket. But once you've done that and you've got a sense of what's going on and you're looking at your bucket going, no wonder I feel a bit shabby, it's important that we start trying to, and this is where it gets powerful, understand what we can do to be really careful about what we let into our stress bucket. So there are two filters that are worth applying. One relates to the circle of control. So have a look at your stress bucket and just be super careful about how you are thinking about things and how you are assuming responsibility for things that may not be yours to control. So, for example, when I was doing this last winter, somebody said, I'm really worried about the cost of electricity. Are you? When we got to this point, I said, are you responsible for setting the cost of electricity? No. No. Okay. So worrying about the cost of electricity rising, it's going to rise whether you worry about it or not. Well, yeah, but I've still got to pay the bill. Okay. Now we're going to get specific. You're worried about your ability to pay your electricity bill. Yeah. What can you do about your electricity bill? Because you do have some influence over that. You do have some control over that. You could start working from a coffee shop or a shared working space. If you work from home, you could go into the office more often if it's local, so that you don't have to have the heating on during the day. You can turn the thermostat down and wear a coat and buy an hoodie and look like a gruffalo online, but you're warm, and that's cool. You can set your heating to turn off the radiators in rooms that you don't use very much. There are a series of things that are in your control that you can do. So what you're worried about is your electricity usage. You're worried about it because you want to be able to pay the bill and the price is going up, but that price is going to go up regardless of whether you worry about it. So be super clear about the things that are in your bucket and how you are framing them, because the things that you control are your behavior, your choices, your capabilities, how you respond to something, your words and your actions. There are things you can influence. So you can influence your electricity bill. You can control to an extent, your electricity usage and the steps you take to minimize your electricity usage. In the same way, if you've got a difficult relationship with someone at work, you can control your behavior and your words and your choices to stop this becoming all-out war. You can try and influence others to understand your perspective. You can try and influence the individual you've got a challenge with to get them to understand your perspective, but you can't control their behavior and their choices. So if you have behaved as professionally as possible and you have documented the situations that have caused you concern, and they choose to behave in a different way that leads to HR getting involved or whatever, you have managed the things in your control. So being stressed about their behavior should be, your response should be to manage the things in your control. Being stressed about what they do isn't going to change anything, because you don't control the way they think and the way that they behave. So apply a really powerful filter around making sure that you are not worrying about the wrong thing, that you have got your focus absolutely on the thing that you control, the thing that you can do. And there will be some things we just have to accept. We may not agree with certain political leaders in the country at the moment, in this country or in the world. But if we acknowledge that we don't, and we focus on the things we can control, our own choices, our own behaviors, our own actions, then mentally we will feel more in control. Mentally, we will feel healthier, and we won't be consuming mental energy getting absolutely furious about something that isn't going to change through the medium of our fury. Because if that was the case, an awful lot of things would be quite different in the world. And the other is to look at the evidence base. When we talked about overthinking and internally generated thoughts, be super clear when you look at the things in your bucket that you aren't worrying about things that are internally generated for which you have no evidence. So if you're worried that nobody likes you at work, what evidence do you have for that? Do you actually have any evidence, or do you have things that you are taking as evidence to support the internally generated worry that has come from a place of anxiety? Be really careful about worrying and enabling your head to consume mental energy on things for which there is no evidence. And if you're unsure about that, go back to what we said before. Find a safe place, chew that over with somebody, get somebody else's perspective on it, and believe them if they tell you that you're worrying about nothing. And the other thing that we need to do is find ways to empty our bucket, because having a perpetually filling up bucket is not possible. They are finite. I can testify. It took me 23 working years to fall off my perch, but when I did it quite spectacularly. And emptying your bucket is much less messy and takes much less time to recover from. Buckets will overflow. You need a tap on the bottom of your bucket. And there are two really helpful taps that you can apply to your bucket. And what I would very much like you to do is think about two different things. One is activities that you enjoy that use other parts of your brain. So these might be other parts of your brain than your working brain. So this might be things like creative things or physical things, things that involve using your hands, getting you outside, things out in nature. And the reason for that is that when we take our focus away from thinking and we move it into immersing ourselves in creativity, in doing, in exercise that's very consuming, in activities that give us a sense of peace and calm, we're using different parts of our brain and we're giving our thinking brain chance to simmer right down. So we talked before about taking 5-minute breaks throughout the day and having a proper lunch hour. This is about giving ourselves time of an evening or of a weekend or on holiday on a regular basis to properly switch the working brain off and give it time to properly simmer right down. It's powered by attention. So if you do something consuming with a different part of your brain, your attention doesn't go to work and the work brain gets a chance to simmer down. And as a result, the stress in your bucket from that source drops away. And actually, from quite a lot of sources, if you go and focus on something else, you can't think about all the things that are causing you stress at the moment. So these are just examples drawn from having delivered this session lots of times. My own personal place to disappear to is into a good book. I am a much nicer person when I've had a chance to read for a couple of hours on a Saturday morning. And my husband knows to get up, not get me out of bed, but to appear a couple of hours later when I'm sat up in bed reading, and I'm a vastly nicer person and I'm much more ready for the weekend because I've had a couple of hours immersed in whatever I'm reading at the time. There are others who unfathomably find the same sense of peace and calm from running. I am not one of those. I'm delighted for those of you that are. Please do it often. I won't be joining you. Others have mentioned Lego or crafting, making cards, making beautiful things, knitting, drawing, sewing, all of those sorts of things. But then physical exercise of any sort, team sports that draw you into a focus on the skill of the sport and being part of a team and the banter and the socializing and all of those sorts of things. And the reason I'm mentioning all of these is that we seem to view these as the nice things to do, as a treat. And we feel a bit guilty if we're doing these instead of doing chores. Whereas I would argue that these are all vastly better for us, unless you're someone who enjoys ironing and cleaning, and that I get that. Instilling order and calm in a messy house can actually be mentally really quite nice. But these shouldn't be luxuries. These should be the things that we plan actively into our weeks to make sure that we are giving our stress buckets time to empty. The other thing we can do are things that help us take control. Things like emptying your mailbox. If having an empty mailbox allows you to switch off at night, brilliant. Fill your boots. MITs are most important tasks. So I start the day with a long list of things I could usefully do, but then I mark the things, my most important tasks. These are the ones I must do today. So when I start butterflying, I take my list of 15 things that I could ideally do today, and I do the ones that can't wait, which is usually 3 or 4. And now I've got a manageable list of 3 or 4 rather than an overwhelming list of 15. Some other suggestions on there: declining unnecessary meetings, massive bugbear of mine. I think everybody should take a look at the meeting agenda and go, that's not good use of my time, I'm not going. There are lots of things about menu planning and making lists and planning chores so that you also are able to plan in time for guilt-free time doing the things on the first list, because they really matter. And if you do all of this, start with your newly cleaned up stress bucket. You know, you've taken out the things you don't control, taken out the things you've got no evidence for. You're looking at that big old list. You're looking at the ways in which you can take control of some of those stresses, because that will reduce your stress, your sense of stress. You could take it to work. You can clean off some of the home stuff if you don't want to, and you could use it to have a think about the drivers behind those stresses and have a conversation with your line manager to figure out what and how things might improve your mental energy at work. You could have a look at what you can do. So what am I personally doing to make time for de-stressing activities and to apply discipline and control to diary management? And I'm taking breaks and I'm speaking up early and I'm understanding and using my adjustments and so on. That's great. That's your personal responsibility. What can the organization do? Do you have adjustments? Would you value adjustments? If so, what are the policies? What's the conversation? What's the approach? What are things that the organization could do that would facilitate you or your team or the organization in general feeling less stressed about particular things? And also, what can your line manager do? Because if you feel able to arrive at a version of a stress management, a stress bucket and an analysis, and you can say, these are the things I'm doing, but one of the things in my stress bucket is the way you delegate work, or the way that we schedule everything into a sprint, but then new demands come in that have to be done on top of what we've planned. We've planned to use 98% of our time this week, and then something else comes in and you say, yes, can we not do that? Can we find a way to not do this? Because it makes life really stressful. Finding the ways in which to raise and identify the things that your line manager can do means that we're back to that first chart of the things that you can do, the things the organization do, and the things that your line manager can do. And even if you don't feel able to share it with anybody, you're empowering yourself to know what you can do. And the more you empower yourself, the more confident you'll feel in being able to arrive at a place where you can start to potentially raise things with your line manager or with the organization. And no organization is perfect. Everywhere has work to do, and you have your own role to play. At the end of the day, you are the only person who lives 24/7 with your own mental health. So taking care of your own mental health, supporting other people in your team to do the same, to look after their mental health. You can have a team in the most toxic environment, but you can put a bubble around yourselves and focus on things, think about things in a healthy way, acknowledge the things that are other people's issues and the things that you don't control. Line managers, this is my call to you to step up to help people think about their mental health like this. Be vulnerable, be willing to understand what you can do differently that will help people to be able to manage their mental health. And organizations, this is my plea to you, to encourage everybody to think about the fact that we've got finite mental energy. If you want maximum mental energy to be applied to their job role, you need to encourage everybody to think about what and how they are hoarding in their stress buckets, and what you as an organization can do to help them and support them to be as effective as possible. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been helpful. I think Emma provided details of how to raise any questions, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you, Jackie. That was so interesting. I have got to say 14 instant things in my pocket. And yeah, wow. And also I know exactly what to do about it. So thank you very much. I loved the water analogy. A few things down, the mental space for curiosity. That was a little bit of a light bulb actually. And as were other things. Thank you so much. I think everybody got out of this session.
Good. I hope so. I hope so. It helps me when I'm starting to think. I mentally step back and just go, yeah, there's a lot on.
Yeah.
I just need to be a bit kinder to myself. Which things am I going to stop worrying about because I've got other bigger fish? And what can I do about those to give me that sense of control? Have I done everything I can? And if so,
compartmentalizing, isn't it? Like you say, your thinking brain, your work brain, and taking the time, taking yourself away. After this, I'm going to go for a walk before my next meeting.
Excellent. My work here is done.
Exactly. It's worked.
It's really interesting when someone gives you permission to focus on how you're using your mental energy. And when you start thinking about how you're apportioning your mental energy, you get quite picky about the things that you're willing to use it on, and also the nonsense that you deny.
And I think in my experience, and it's a very personal thing, so it's not anything that's ever been put on me, but it's guilt of not being at my desk.
Yeah. And
actually, if I am at my desk for all of those hours without taking a break, I'm not really going to be doing my job properly. So
you will do more being at your desk for 3 hours with some breaks and 3 hours and some breaks and having a proper break in the middle than you would if you sat there for the 7 straight hours.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
your productivity will decline if you keep overusing your brain and you don't give it time to simmer down and reset by using a different part of your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go and empty my bucket. Your work here is done.
Excellent. I'm delighted.
Thank you very much. And thank you for everybody watching on record. Again, Emma at itstimetotthrive.co.uk for any questions, and I can redirect you to Jackie. Okay, so see you all soon. Thank you.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.